I'm going to sing a song that I think is very apt for the troubled times in which we live. And it's a song called Daughters and Sons, written by my great friend Tommy Sands from Rostrevor in the north of Ireland in the County Down, a place I've visited many, many times, and usually for the purpose of saying hello to Tommy and other members of the wonderful Sands family on the way to somewhere else. But I always make a point of stopping by Rostrevor. I've known Tommy for a good many years, and first met him in America, in Philadelphia, at a folk festival in a place called Fisher's Pool in Lansdale, just outside the city. And Tommy came by with his family. They were visiting America, and I was delighted to be introduced to him by Robbie O'Connell. And we've known each other ever since. And indeed, on many occasions, Tommy has travelled with me, and usually with the Greenfields of America and members of that group all over the United States. And we first met each other in Seattle, where he literally arrived off the plane onto the stage and hadn't met other members of the group. And we started to perform together, and everybody sort of stayed out for the first couple of verses of Tommy's songs. They hadn't heard them before, and then joined in, and being the wonderful musicians that they all are, they were able to make it sound like an arranged, rehearsed concert. It was nothing of the sort. We had many, many great times together, and a couple of memorable ones too. I'll let Tommy himself tell you about one of them.
I suppose in COVID times with lockdown hairstyles, you get a bit of a chance to think about what it's like on the road, and you wonder, will you ever be going to America again? And the first time we went there, I went with my family, met up with people at whose American wake we had played at before we left home, and it was like seeing a ghost. It was as if we were in a different state altogether. But then I went back on my own, and I met up with Mick Moloney in the green fields of America. And they were very special people. For me, very important, because they became like a family on the road. When you travel together and you experience highs and lows on the stage and off it, there's a very close bond gathers itself. And I suppose music by its nature is about harmony and about togetherness. But that particular grouping of people, they were all very strong, brilliant musicians, every one of them. But somehow, when you're travelling along together, we wouldn't even have to talk. But we could sense if one was feeling a bit down or a little bit tired or weary, and they would be targeted to some lift your heart sort of talk. I remember heading off one morning from Boise, Idaho, to Missoula, Montana, and the man at the hotel says, "Don't be going there today now, because the snow was already beginning to fall like half-drunk seagulls on the bonnet of the car." He says, "You can't go to Missoula. Don't go there today." We said, "But we have to go. We have to go." And the man says, "No, don't," because he says, "Do you know Lolo Pass? You have to go through Lolo Pass." We didn't, but we did eventually. We headed off, and Lolo Pass was difficult. A long story. Maybe Moloney will tell you about it, but a few tunes come out of it anyway. Eugene O'Donnell was on the job. He wrote a few tunes. I think one was called Lolo Pass, one was called Dead Man's Gulch. But we passed through it all and had a great night in Missoula, Montana, one of the best nights ever we had. But they were great times and very important times for me. And I look forward to more of them, hopefully.
Tommy Sands there speaking to us from Rostrevor, and I think it's fair to assume that he has only had a very passing relationship with the hairdressing community of County Down over the last 12 months. More power to you, Tommy. Tommy wrote this song, Daughters and Sons, several decades ago. I've been singing it myself for over 30 years. And Tommy and many other members of the Sands family, there were originally 5 of them all together. And now there are 4. There's Tommy and Colm Sands, who lives next door to him. Ben Sands, the last time I checked, he was living close to Newry. And we're in constant contact by email, giving each other advice, and why wouldn't we? And then there's Anne Sands. But originally, back in the early years of the Sands family becoming professional musicians in the 70s, the youngest brother, Eugene, was very tragically killed in a car accident. I never met him. But I met the others. And in fact, my first acquaintanceship with the Sands family was on the radio. And I was driving from Limerick. My parents were still alive at the time. And I was driving from Limerick to Dublin, and I had the car radio on. And suddenly a song came on and says, I says to him, says I says I to him. I says I to him, there'll have to be some changes. I said, what in the name of God is that? And who's singing it? And it was so memorable. And I got out of the car and asked around, and nobody seemed to know. But eventually I found out it was Colm Sands' composition, with the usual whimsy associated with many of the songs that he writes. But the Sands family started touring mostly in Europe, on the continent, and indeed in Germany before the wall came down. And early on in the journey, they met some exile singers from the Nueva Canción movement of South and Central America, who were singing and writing songs and poetry that was more designed to bring together people who might have had differences, and some very serious differences. And these were songs that were, I suppose, part of the process of reconciliation or healing. And the Sands family, according to the stories I hear, were very decisively influenced by that. Started to write the kind of songs that would bring people together at a very, very troubled time in Northern Irish history, when the guns were blazing and the bombs were going off. And Tommy wrote many songs himself about those times, and he wrote one memorable song which Pete Seeger was involved in, called The Music of Healing. And maybe that's a song for another time. But Daughters and Sons, I liked the first time I heard it, and I've performed it in various countries, including Cuba, where I was with Athena, Tergis and Billy McComiskey.
They wouldn't hear your music and they pulled your paintings down, and they wouldn't read your writing and they banned you from the town. But they couldn't stop you dreaming, and the victory you have won. For you sow the seeds of freedom in your daughters and your sons.
I also performed it in Vietnam with Louise and Michelle Mulcahy and Dylan Foley.
I don't know your religion, but one day I heard you pray for a world where everyone could work and children they could play. And though you've never had your share of the fruits that you have won, you sowed the seeds of equality in your daughters and your sons.
And it's a song that always people can relate to and resonates with people, because it's a song of hope. It's a song basically about all the people who work hard to try to make the world a better place. Tommy and his family started out being farmers, and I could relate to that too, because my uncles were farmers. And they got together. It's a very communal activity in all farming life, to get together for saving the hay. When he started to become a writer of songs of peace, he engaged with a lot of the paramilitaries in the north of Ireland, people like Gusty Spence and people like David Irvine. And I met David Irvine, and we did some presentations together, not just in the north of Ireland, but indeed as far afield as Charlottesville, Virginia, where I was there with Tommy and with David Irvine, and he became a champion of peace and was actually a respected voice in very hardline loyalist communities. For those of you familiar with the politics of Northern Ireland, that was not an easy thing to accomplish. The peace process happened through a lot of initiatives, and they included initiatives from the musicians, who often can meet one another when maybe politicians are not allowed by their constituencies to do the same thing. Tommy has toured with people like Seamus Heaney, and toured with politicians like Gerry Adams and David Trimble and John Hume and Martin McGuinness. Tommy met them all and was singing songs of bridging gaps long before other singers in the north of Ireland, understandably divided through their ancestral loyalties and points of view. But Tommy's always risen above that, as other members of the Sands family. And I'm very, very honoured indeed to sing this song, Daughters and Sons, which is really an anthem of hope and optimism. And I'm going to be performing it with the amazing Athena Tergis, who is in lockdown in Tuscany, Italy. And that doesn't stop her one little bit. And she's going to perform with me on this, Daughters and Sons. They wouldn't hear your music and they pulled your paintings down, and they wouldn't read your writing and they banned you from the town. But they couldn't stop you dreaming, and the victory you have won, where you sow the seeds of freedom in your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. You sow the seeds of freedom in your daughters and your sons. Your weary smile, it proudly hides the chain marks on your hands, where you boldly tried to realise the dreams of everyone. And though your body's bent in two, a victory you have won, where you sow the seeds of justice in your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. Sow the seeds of justice in your daughters and your sons. I don't know your religion, but one day I heard you pray for a world where everyone could work and children they could play. And though you've never had your share of the fruits that you have won, you sow the seeds of equality in your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. You sow the seeds of equality in your daughters and your sons. They taunted you in Belfast, and they tortured you in Spain. And in that war-sown ghetto, they tied you up in chains. In Vietnam and Chile, when they came with tanks and guns. But it's there you sow the seeds of peace in your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. It's there you sow the seeds of peace in your daughters and your sons. And all the dreams you've painted can be seen by one and all. And now you've got them thinking, and the future's just begun, where you sow the seeds of freedom in your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. You sow the seeds of freedom in your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. In your daughters and your sons. You sow the seeds of freedom in your daughters and your sons.